Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us this morning. This is the fourth, what we are calling Fabulous Foundation Fridays. And we've been having a series with the School of Education, but also collaborating with our peers in other colleges in the university. And so today I should introduce myself because I haven't met everyone yet. So I'm Jen Katz-Bonacontro, and I'm Associate Professor and Associate Dean of Research in the School of Education. And with me today, I have another Associate Dean of Research, Neville Beccaria from
Everyone.
Westfall College. So this is great because what we want to do is co-host this session across both colleges. And so thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to take a couple minutes just to acquaint everyone to our session today and give a full overview to introduce our two guest speakers. So today we're very excited to host the National Endowment for the Arts, and they have come with to visit with us today to explain the research strategic plan and to talk about the grant opportunities. So today we have Sunil Iyengar and Melissa Menzer. And so I just want to give you a brief background and bio so that you can acquaint yourselves with them. So we have Melissa up here, and does everyone have their name tag on? Let's see. Okay, and Sunil is over here too. So Sunil, thank you so much. And I know Sunil has visited Drexel on our campus and has known several of us for many years. So welcome back to Drexel, shall we say. And we welcome Melissa. I believe this is your first time with us in a session. Is that right? Yes. Okay, wonderful. So Sunil Iyengar directs the Office of Research and Analysis at the National Endowment for the Arts, and under his leadership, the office has produced dozens of research reports about the arts' value and impact. He's hosted periodic research events and webinars like these, led strategic plan development for the agency, launched 2 research awards programs. That's pretty fascinating, I didn't know that. And also established research and data partnerships with the US Census Bureau, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and the National Institutes of Health. So great to have you back here, Sunil. And we also have Dr. Melissa Menzer, who is a program analyst with Office of Research and Analysis at NEA. And among her duties that support arts research and evaluation initiatives, she manages the research office's external funding programs. She works in the research grants and arts program, supports research projects focused on the value and impact of arts on humans, communities, and societies, and the Research Labs Cooperative Agreement Program, which supports transdisciplinary research teams tasked with yielding empirical insights about the arts for the benefit of the arts and non-arts sectors alike. So Melissa completed her doctorate in human development with the University of Maryland and has bachelor's degrees in psychology and studio art. So today, Sunil is going to give a presentation of the research strategic plan, and together as a group, we'll engage in learning about it from 11 to 11:30. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have individual time slots. And so I just want to remind everybody what those time slots are and let you know how that's going to go. So from 11:30 to 11:45, we have a time slot for a Westfall professor. And then from 11:45 to 12, we have a second time slot. And then we have 12 to 12:15. We have a School of Education professor, and then a second one from 12:15 to 12:30. And then we have someone from 12:30 to 12:45. So just remember what your time slot is. We're just going to use this one Zoom link, Zoom room. And so if your time slot is at 12:30, we would just ask that you peel off at 11:30 after Sunil's done and then come back at 12:30. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions about the format today? All right, so I'm going to hand this over to Sunil, and you have screen sharing capabilities if you would like to share any slides that you've developed.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and Neville too. I'm just really pleased to be back with you all in a different capacity. Who knew, right? So many years later. But we have a lot of work going on at Drexel, as was mentioned. I might mention a little bit of it in my brief talk. But I also know that Jason Schutbach is, a former NEA alum, a great friend of ours. It's good to have him close by. And just good to see all of your faces. So I'm going to go forth and just talk a little bit, very high level stuff about our work. Let me see if I can do this effectively. This is the true test, right? None of that stuff you said on my resume really matters if I can't do this. All right, are you seeing it? Mm-hmm. Okay, let me try to get it to the point where, all right. So and tell me if you can't see something or we can have a conversation during, but I will just talk briefly, and I'd love to spend some time in Q&A, and I think I'm parked for a couple of those slots right after 11:30 too, so I could speak with a couple of you one-on-one. And my email address, our group email address is right here, and feel free to contact me directly or Melissa. We'd like to think we're very customer friendly. And so let me just tell you, it's actually very timely that Jennifer and Neville reached out because, well, of course, there's a new administration in town. We're actually in the process right now of developing a new strategic plan for the whole agency with our staff and with internal and external stakeholders. And that's going to occur throughout the year. In parallel with that, we're developing a new research agenda for the NEA. So we're on the 5th year of our last 5-year agenda, and I'll just talk briefly about it. So we're in the market for new ideas. So this is a good time to talk. I'll also say a third kind of, all these kinds of converging lines. A third kind of development is we're very soon going to be releasing our new research guidelines, application guidelines for those 2 funding opportunities that were mentioned, research grants in the arts and NEA research labs. So I'm going to be talking to you about those programs, and we can certainly talk afterward, but do expect those guidelines to come out any day now. And the deadlines for those, there'll be 2 deadlines. One is March 19th for grants.gov, which is kind of your shell of the application, and then the actual full submission on March 29th. So those deadlines are coming up, and as I said, the full application guidelines should be out very soon. Again, we can talk about all this in a moment. So there's a lot of items here. I don't need to run over all of them, but I want to give you a sense, those of you especially who haven't been necessarily watching the work of the National Endowment for the Arts from a research perspective, you probably know that we are the premier federal agency for funding arts in this country, arts projects all around the country, every size of community, every type of demographic, so to speak, all around the country. And we do this through our grants and also through partnerships with state arts agencies and other partners. But we do have a research mission. And so the research mission is essentially to promote knowledge about the value and impact of the arts for individuals and for communities. And so we do that through our own internal kind of research agenda, but also through our research grants programs and our research labs program. And so we'll talk about that, of course. But I wanted to just familiarize yourself. So if you look at the first 2 or 3 bullets, those are things that we've kind of done internally, so to speak, and with external stakeholders, of course. But our staff really has kind of taken the lead on doing analyses and promoting research in these areas. So I'll talk about some of that. Then I'll talk about some of our partnerships you may want to tune into. And I'll land on, of course, I think the most interesting thing today, perhaps the grant award opportunities. So Jennifer did refer to our research strategic plan or research agenda, so to speak. We have it on our website, but I just want to give you a very high level view of it. We've kind of put together this schematic just to help you think about, if you view this as 3 distinct columns, you could think about on the left-hand side, these boosters or inhibitors, or if you want to think about that, preconditions to what we have in the central column. So what are precursors or necessary contextual factors for promoting arts participation, which is the top circle there? And within arts participation, all the ways in which people can engage in the arts at an individual level or at a community level. And also what are ways or precursors to healthy arts and cultural assets? So artists, cultural workers, arts industries, arts organizations, and that's in that second column, the second circle. And so, we've tried to invest more on the left-hand side. We've tried to start to build this side up a little bit. It still is kind of lagging, I have to say. Work that often is qualitative research that really gives us a sense of, some of those factors that influence people's participation habits, or that influence people's, or influence the health of these, of what we can think of as the arts ecosystem. And the central column, we've tried to really curate and collect and curate detailed statistical information about the arts in the US. So in these two circles, how do people participate in the arts? We do a lot of national surveys with various federal agencies. How do we track the sort of arts and cultural assets when you think about workers and artists and arts organizations? So that's largely statistical, descriptive statistics, if you will. Then on the third column on the right-hand side was where, over the 5 years, I think we can be very proud, I think hopefully with our grantees and others, in having boosted this area. What are individual level outcomes associated with the arts? And what are societal and community level outcomes? And for those kinds of studies, I have to say, we've tended to rely more heavily on experimental and quasi-experimental studies. So if not randomized controlled trials, and some other study design that provides us a counterfactual, so we can understand more about causality and how the arts actually influence these outcome areas, which we'll be describing in a moment. So at a very high level, this is kind of our diagram for thinking about, and if you think about research grant projects, for example, you might just kind of ask yourself as an exercise, where in this map do you see what you're interested in studying? Is it a precursor, a healthy arts ecosystem? Is it part of is it a facet of the arts ecosystem, or is it a kind of outcome of engaging in the arts, or the arts cultural infrastructure? So in that middle column, if you go back for a moment, shoring up these descriptive statistics and trying to plug gaps, we've really relied heavily on our partners in the government, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, to provide data on the arts and GDP, for example, Bureau of Labor Statistics to look at employment of artists and cultural workers, and the US Bureau of State, Census Bureau, where we look at arts participation rates, also track some organizational characteristics having to do, like the economic census, having to do with arts organizations. Oh, I'll also just say, one of the things we feel good about is just in the wake of COVID, over the last few months, and it just came out a few weeks ago, we released a report with FEMA, actually, where we worked with them to do an analysis of the vulnerability of the arts sector in time of COVID, and also some of the prospects for recovery. So we have that information on our website if people are interested. Resource I'd be remiss not to plug here is the National Archive of Data on Arts and Culture, which has many of these statistics for analysts and others. This is a little bit of an outdated screenshot, but the best way is to choose the search engine of your choice and type in NADAC, NADAC, and arts, because I think the string is too long for me to remember right now for getting to NADAC. But it's a great resource for arts and cultural practitioners and researchers, and it has some on-the-fly kinds of analysis and analytical tools, as well as data sets. And we're always also in the market for data sets that you may want to contribute to this expanding repository. So going back to those circles I talked about, not to get too in the weeds, but if you were to think about outcome areas related to, say, arts participation, again, here's a kind of simplistic chart. But if you look on the left, what are stimulants or deterrents for people to participate in the arts? Here are the various kinds of art modes we might consider, not to mention art forms. And on the right-hand side, these are three buckets where we found literature to be fairly consistent. Now, these are somewhat fungible. I mean, these buckets are porous, let's say, on the right-hand side, but these are categories of outcomes in which we really, for the last 5 years, have really invested more heavily. So you see a lot of research having to do with psychological well-being, coping, trauma-related research about the arts, but also healing and health. Educational outcomes and cognitive outcomes and learning and creativity, as well as some physiological effects of the arts related to motor skills development, for example, or other kinds of biomarker-related outcomes that we've tended to look at as well. So there's a whole host of outcomes related to arts participation that we've tended to study. Meanwhile, this looks very similar, but it's actually looking now in terms of the venues and arts organizations and establishments and workforce and the sort of the art infrastructure of the arts. This too has been correlated with some really interesting buckets of outcomes that we've studied, having to do with civic engagement, social cohesion, corporate innovation, even also livability of communities and the desirability to live in those communities, and also, of course, economic growth. So that's kind of, again, going back to our research agenda, what are tools we have at our disposal to implement this agenda? Well, one of them we're really happy to have is for about 10 years now, we've been working with other federal agencies, representatives at about 17 or so federal agencies that are interested and see value in attending quarterly meetings with us to try to discover what is the confluence of research and practice when we look at human development, so across the lifespan, and the arts. And you can imagine some of these agencies you see, and especially NIH and NSF, you may not think, okay, they don't have the arts in their remit, do they? And probably they don't. I mean, if you look at their mission statement, it doesn't say the arts explicitly, but they are very aware, and the people we work with there are aware of the arts' ability to help achieve some of their missions. So they have been helpful. And what does this group do? We try to pool resources and try to develop co-develop funding opportunities when we can. I think where we've been most successful is in cross-promoting our reports and funding opportunities across, because many people don't think of these other agencies as sources of arts funding, for example. So I'd be happy to talk about this later. But one of the things that came out of this, or was a byproduct of this, in addition to other work we've done that I'm proud of, one of them is a series of reports we've produced. Now, a lot of these have been produced by the NEA, but we've done them in consultation with that group. And one report that's not here actually is one that just came out last year about the arts and the opioids crisis. When we started that report, that was the going epidemic. Things have obviously changed, but it's still highly relevant and important to look at what can the arts contribute to substance abuse disorder and pain management, and that's what the report looks at. But the byproduct I was going to mention is Sound Health. So Sound Health is an initiative which we're partnering with the National Institutes of Health. That's Francis Collins, the NIH director there on the left, and the soprano Renee Fleming on the right, as well as the Kennedy Center. And you may have heard of this initiative. It started as essentially a series of workshops and public events to showcase music at the intersection of neuroscience and health. So you'd have musicians with neuroscientists, with health practitioners talking in panels and even performing together. And it kind of evolved over time. NIH actually created a trans NIH committee to look at how they could fund opportunities in this area. So we did a peer-reviewed article together, and they then essentially put out a $5 million funding opportunity, and NEA, glad to say, was able to contribute a modest amount toward that. So we co-sponsored that opportunity, and there are now 3 new award opportunities that have just come out over the last year, a couple in just the last few weeks. So I'm happy to talk more about that if people are interested, looking at music and health. And out of that, one of the things we did on the NEA side is we created something called the Sound Health Network. And this is brand new. It's going to launch on January 26th. That's just a few days away, 5 p.m. Eastern time. We can share the link with you afterward if you'd like. And the team at University of California, San Francisco, working with some others, has developed a clearinghouse of resources about the arts and neuroscience, health and wellness, primarily research papers and journal articles, but also other gray matter. They are also going to be a convener of this field. They are also going to work to get the researchers in this field better connected so they can have sort of more collective impact on the space. And they're also going to communicate the results out to the general public and to communities of practice more effectively than I think has been able to have been done in the past. This team here is led by Julene Johnson, who's herself a neuroscientist and a nursing researcher, with Charles Lim, who studies creativity in the brain, who's an MD also. And we just have a new communications lead who's going to be great, Indra Viscontis, and Sherry Robb, who's a music therapy researcher and music therapist at Indiana University. So we're looking forward to launching this on the 26th. We hope you can join us. last initiative I'll just talk about before getting into the grants is our Creative Forces initiative. So I mentioned a good relationship with Drexel. Girija Kaimal and Yoka Brat, among others at Drexel, have been instrumental to the research side of this program. So the Creative Forces itself is a program, an initiative at the National Endowment for the Arts, a partnership actually with Departments of Defense and Veterans Affairs, where we offer creative arts therapies amid other therapies to military personnel and to veterans. And it really highlights integrative medicine. So creative arts therapies is delivered alongside, as I said, other forms of therapies, but we also have an evaluation plan running alongside it. So Girija and Yoka at Drexel have been key to that team, our clinical research team specifically. And they're studying right now, and they, some of the effects and potential of not only music, but also art making, visual art making, like mask making, for example. And so we've launched a National Resource Center for Creative Forces, which is meant to help not only researchers, but people who are looking to serve the military more effectively through, and veterans through the arts. So all this is kind of coming together in a nice way. And I encourage you to take a look at that National Resource Center page. And we in fact have a clinical research page all about some of the studies that have come out of this program that's also on our website. So now we get to a little drum roll here for the research funding opportunities. So as you'll hear, the guidelines, as I mentioned, the guidelines will be released in a few days, very soon. The deadlines again are March 19th and for the kind of preliminary application, and then March 29th for the full application. And
sorry, Sunil, can I just interrupt just for a second? Actually, the upcoming step 1 deadline for grants.gov is March 29. And then the step 2 deadline will be April 8.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going off what was, okay, got it. I'll show you what I was going off of when we can get our facts straight. Thank you so much, Melissa. So this is why it's great to have Melissa in the room anytime. So thank you, Melissa. So we'll read, I'll just ask you to reiterate the deadlines when I'm done with this piece, because I think it's important. But the research grants program, we offer awards ranging from 10,000 to 100,000. And the program, even though I've just gone through this sort of elaborate schematic with you, I want you to know that we really, just like other research agencies in the government who fund studies, we really rely on investigator-initiated proposals. So we are looking for your great ideas, and so it may not fit, exactly in the kind of model we're putting forward. We're just putting them forward as kind of a guidepost for you to think about. And I expect that'll be true once we go through our next research agenda development process. But in any case, to foster public knowledge and understanding about the arts, and really looking at the arts ecosystem or an aspect of the arts ecosystem, and or how it contributes to positive outcomes in any number of domains. So those are some of our kind of our broad approach, sort of an open call. And the 10,000 to 100,000, we have in the past historically put more weight on applications that have, that are obviously qualified and that come in for some of the experimental or quasi-experimental studies I mentioned. So those tend to attract higher dollars. Also, they tend to be more expensive to mount, as you know, those kinds of studies. So that's what we've done typically. And there's a one-to-one match, which I think I'll be talking about in a moment. So the project areas, I kind of just loosely reference this, but again, we're interested in these kinds of topics. If you have any questions about this, happy to discuss again. And that's where we've seen a lot of the really competitive proposals come in. One slide I'm not showing you really is about the criteria. And like every program at the National Endowment for the Arts, we rely on excellence and merit. Artistic excellence, artistic merit are kind of the twin criteria. So in terms of research, typically excellence is viewed as the technical qualifications of the proposal. So is the research question well defined? Is it supported by, does the proposal try to shore up the literature and explain what the contribution of this study would be to the existing body of work? Does it explain, are the research instrumentation, the data collection tools, if there are any, or analytical methods, are they appropriate for the research question? Also, what does the research team look like? All kinds of those variables typically play into the excellence factor, and that's all in our guidelines. The merit factor often has to do with what I like to consider the so what. Like, why should this be funded? Well, that may not exclusively rely on how great the project is from a technical point of view. It may have to do with what populations could benefit from the results, what distribution or dissemination plan is in place for for the grantee to actually share this. What will solving this question help the field discover? So we do look at those kinds of factors, and we're happy to discuss that more if needed. The kinds of projects, again, from a sort of research point of view, there are a lot of them. It could be qualitative, it could be quantitative, it could be mixed methods. These are the kinds of studies that have been funded in the past. One of the things I like to point out to people is even something like dosage studies, which may have to do more with the efficacy of a program or an approach of a program. And indeed, program evaluation too is something that's eligible. So even though I've talked a lot about outcomes, it may not be about what does this arts intervention or program do for society? It may be more like, what's the optimal number of performances that should be given to affect a certain outcome. Let me see if I can do this properly. Okay, and this isn't scientific. It's just a loosey-goosey kind of word cloud to give you a sense of the different research fields that tend to come into us or have come into us in the past. So it really is across the board, which is why I'm so grateful for Jennifer and Neville for bringing us all together. I'll just quickly say with primary data projects, so some projects can come in to just seek to to actually collect data in addition to doing secondary data analyses. So some projects come in just to want to mine data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. Some research grants come in because they actually want to collect data. But if you do collect data, we ask that you also have an analytical component. So we don't fund projects that only collect data. And we also, would like to see a plan to ensure fidelity of the collection and make sure that there's going to be oversight and monitoring of the data collection. Organizational requirements, I don't need to spend a lot of time for this one because you all are at a research university that's clearly eligible for these kinds of grants. I did want to say with application limits a couple of things. One is we actually do accept more than one application per organization. However, in the reality, we have limited funds to go around. So I always tell organizations, even at universities, do try to work together if you can and coordinate, even if, with your colleagues or your cross departments, because the reality is in our goal to serve the general public through these grants, we try to avoid a case where multiple awards go to one organization in the course of a year. I mean, just to give you a range, we may be funding like 12 to 17 research grants a year. That's not too many. And, to have like a lot of them go to one university, just, we try to not, make sure that we attend to the fact that we get applications from all around the country. So we would prefer it if you could try to, think about how to consolidate or how to coordinate your application process within these award cycles. And we do have another grant category called NEA Research Labs, which I'll touch on. One thing I will say that's nice about the Research Grants Program is you can apply to it and to the other NEA funding opportunities, non-research funding opportunities, the grants for arts projects opportunities. So I already went over this a bit. The match, I'll just quickly say that, cost share, this is true of virtually all of our programs at the NEA. We do require a match, and that doesn't need to be a cash match. It could be in-kind contributions, or it could be third-party contributions. And we also know that a lot of universities have been pretty ingenious in providing these matches, maybe through something like waived indirect costs, or through faculty hours, or they find ways to supplement or to offset this cost. But we're happy to walk you through opportunities to do this. Now the labs, I'll just say Drexel already has a research lab at this time. And I've talked with some of you before about how our policy right now is we're only awarding a research lab to, if a research institution gets a lab award, we don't give that same institution another lab award. However, I would encourage you to think about partner organizations that you may want to consider to maybe be the lead applicant for this program. If you're interested, if you're a Drexel faculty member, or if you're, and I don't know to what extent your units have autonomy, but for example, Vanderbilt University, at one time we had a lab to Vanderbilt University and to Vanderbilt Medical School, and that was possible. So you may want to explore when you see our guidelines, whether something like that is possible given your your structure, organizational structure. But the three basic areas we look at are health and well-being, creativity, cognitive learning, and entrepreneurship and innovation. I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to wrap this up, but I just want to show you this. So I'm not going to go over all this, but the research lab is more robust, I would say, and more extensive than the grants program. The whole idea of it is to create a multi-year agenda with another organization and over time to study a particular series of research questions or to have a pipeline of research projects. So if you are looking to incubate something and not just to do a one-off research grant, not that there's anything wrong with that, this is the program we're hoping to attract people to. And there's some requirements here we don't need to go into. The key thing is we do require partnership with a nonprofit arts organization. We require a technical working group to be established that will guide and sort of serve as advisors to the project. And we do, as was mentioned, require a transdisciplinary aspect of this. So more than one research discipline being brought to bear in the study of these things. So I'll skip all this stuff. Again, the same kind of eligibility issues arise, I think. The amount is different. It's about up to 150,000 each year, or each project period. But what's interesting here is, unlike the grants, this can be renewed without competition. So our ideal is to keep renewing research labs that are performing very well over, so you could have up to, I don't know how many years, I haven't calculated it, Melissa knows, maybe up to 8 years or 10 years working with an institution that's doing great work and is continually building up their field of practice. So I was kind of a little bit scattershot toward the end, but I apologize for that. But if you have any questions, you know, I know we're running out of time for this segment, but I did want to give our information here, and I'll just give my personal or my work personal email to everyone right now. It's iyengar@arts.gov. And don't hesitate to email me if you have any questions about any of this, and we can't get to your questions now. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate such a comprehensive overview. What I wanted to suggest is that we allow people to go into their one-on-one time slots just so that we don't crowd people out of their time. So what we would do now is have their meeting. Does that make sense?
And could I just offer too that I've only spoken again at a very high level about research, but there is, of course, especially for those of you from Westfall, there's so many other program units within the NEA in the arts. So I didn't cover that ground. But you know, we are happy to connect you with the appropriate discipline directors or staff to talk about things like visual arts or design or creative placemaking or media arts or whatever the specific disciplines. This is just research.
That's great. Thanks, Sunil. So Jen, in terms of the slots, Westfall has the first two. So the first slot will be Julie Goodman, and then the second will be Natalie Mathey from Westfall. So I'm assuming, Jen, we can all step off and Julie can stay on, and then in about 15 minutes, Natalie would come back. Is that correct? Oh.
That's right. And then it's followed by.
Oh. Sorry.
And then I think there's a couple, one or two division.
Jen's breaking up. We can't
Yeah.
hear you.
So yeah, so we're gonna stop the general report and then proceed.
Okay.
So